We have seen countless cards create tons of iconic moments across the history of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Whether it was the classic ace monsters like Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, and Exodia the Forbidden One, or tournament level cards like Rescue Cat, El Shaddoll Construct, and Necros of Trishula, or even forbidden cards like Yatagarasu, Subsitoad, and number 16 Shockmaster, everyone has their own personal favorites that symbolize their favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Moments. With so much awesome dueling action, it's difficult to capture all of it in an accessory product until now. The Golden Duelist Collection accessories showcase loads of iconic cards across each item, and to top it all off, the King of Games Yu-Gi-Moto along with this ace monster Dark Magician in gleaming gold. This is the product description for all of the Golden Duelist Collection products, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing 3 out of the 4. I was not able to get my hands on the binder, but I do have the mat, the deck box, and the sleeves, and I'm going to talk about whether or not you should buy these products. The mat is the first product that I want to look at here because it's going to be in the background anyway, but it also is missing one key feature of the other 3 products that really makes them stand out. The mat, in all intents and purposes, is basically just a regular game mat. You have some cool stuff going on here. You do have the iconic quote-unquote Dark Magician in gleaming gold, and you have Yu-Gi-Moto, and also you do have some of those competitive and iconic cards in the background. What you'll notice with all of these Golden Duelist Collection cards, or I guess all the cards in the artwork, is that all of them are either from the anime or actually saw play in the TCG. And this is really cool because, to be completely honest, Konami does not very often acknowledge the presence of competitive cards. Of course, we see duels and we see strategy sites posting things about the competitive landscape, but for the most part, as far as promotional material, especially stuff that Konami is making a mat out of, we don't get to see a ton of competitive discussion. I know this isn't a discussion on this mat, but there's lots of stuff going on here. You have cards that weren't necessarily from the anime, but were actually very strong in the TCG, and while on this particular mat it might be a little bit less so than with the other products, which we'll look at in a second, it still is pretty cool to see cards that weren't seen in the anime but were pretty competitive in the TCG. The problem with this mat, and it's only $15, maybe I can't be too hard on it, the problem with this mat is twofold. Personally, I do not like the black bars on the top and bottom. It gives it a more cinematic look in theory, but I think in practice it just looks a little bit silly. It looks like they couldn't quite extend the card artwork. It especially looks silly when you look up like right here when you have like Monster Reborn just cut in half. That looks kind of weird. The other big issue with this mat, and the biggest issue in my opinion, is that it's missing sort of this holographic feel that the other 3 products have, and also when you look at the product descriptions for the other 3 products, it really mentions that the whole point of the Golden Duelist Collection is this holographic foiling. I don't know exactly what they call it, but it's pretty cool looking and it's not on this mat. And I know what you're thinking, hey Dzeeff, they can't put holographic foiling on a mat. Well, in the OCG they actually have a couple times and it looks pretty cool, but we didn't get it on our mat unfortunately. So this mat for $15 I don't think is like the greatest thing out there. You can probably just spend your $15 elsewhere, just use whatever mat you're using. However, when we look at these sleeves, I think this is where this sort of product really takes off. So this is the foiling that we're talking about, and oh my gosh, does it look good. I mean, it looks really good on the camera, obviously, because there's a light right on it, but I use these all throughout YCS Atlanta, and I kept getting compliments. These are so cool looking. It's really awesome, and especially on these sleeves. So when we go in here, this one you can see mostly prominent competitive cards. You see things like Plague Spreader Zombie, Pendulum Sorcerer, Big Eye, Dark-Armed Dragon, Traptrix Rafflesia, Masterpiece. These are cards that, while I'm sure a couple of those, I mean, I haven't seen the anime, I'm sure a couple of those appear in the anime. Overall, they're mostly just competitive cards, which is really cool because Konami doesn't acknowledge the competitive side of the game too often unless they have to. But the main selling point of these is, yeah, these look gorgeous, and they're only like $4 or $5, and that's awesome. And I think that they make great extra deck sleeves. Now, if you've never used a Konami sleeve before, you might be wondering, well, why am I saying that they're a great extra deck sleeve? After all, on the product description, it says that they're totally totally tournament legal and you could use them in your main deck. And while that is technically true, I don't know if you guys have used Konami sleeves before. There are a few issues with these Konami sleeves. Not necessarily these ones in particular, but just all Konami sleeves out there. The issue number one is that they just don't last very long. And that is really sad because it means that when you have sleeves like this, you really can't use them on the main deck because, and I'm not exaggerating here, by 3 rounds of play, just regular tournament play, 3 rounds in the tournament, your sleeves would just be destroyed. The main issue with Konami sleeves is that they split on the corners. They have this backing and they have the front, and then if you shuffle them enough times, no matter how like easy you go on them, they just always split. This has been a huge problem with every single Konami sleeve for the past 10 years. You can't avoid it with these ones, and that's just, I mean, it's the nature of the beast, right? But the good news is that you can use these as an extra deck, and unless you're playing Pot of Extravagance, you won't actually have to shuffle your extra deck, so you won't actually have that issue. Now, I will say that they, kind of like all Konami sleeves, and sometimes it happens with just any of the ones that don't have a matte backing, these will definitely start to stick together over like a course of time. There's nothing you can really do about that. That's not really that big of an issue. The main issue is that they split if you shuffle them too much. If you shuffle them like you would an actual main deck, light shuffling like this shouldn't really affect them, but when you shuffle them like an actual main deck, yeah, you're going to face some issues over the course of just a couple rounds of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's actually insane how fast Konami sleeves just like deteriorate. It's not even like one tournament, it's like 3 rounds. This is kind of a known issue though. The other issue, the one that I can't believe Konami is still doing to this day, it's like a super cost-cutting issue. There's only 50 sleeves per pack, which means even if you wanted to use them on your main deck, you're actually 5 cards short because your side deck would also have to be 15 cards, so you'd have to buy 2 packs anyway. Now, because these aren't being used in the main deck, I guess it's not that big of an issue, but still, it's kind of something worth mentioning. I know for the WCQ sleeves, they bump it up to 60, which makes a lot more sense because they're encouraging you to use it on your main and side deck. And they actually, when you top an event, they make you use those sleeves, not these kind of sleeves, but the WCQ sleeves, so they're going to put 60 per pack. But as far as these packs go, it's only 50, so even if you really wanted to, just for like one tournament, use these on your main deck, you'd be stuck having to buy 2 packs. However, because they're pretty cheap and because they look cool, I actually can recommend these sleeves only for extra deck use. It's sort of the caveat there. Overall, though, I'm really satisfied with how these looks, and I think most people that see these will think that they look pretty cool as well. Really sucks that they couldn't get this foiling on the mat, but it's fine. And then we go to the mat, or not the mat, the deck box here, the last item, and you can kind of see not the same exact foiling, and it is kind of hard because looking on camera now, it actually doesn't look like it's foiling, but this is foiling all across the front of this deck box. You can see it only goes from some angles. It's like okay, it's obviously not as like crazy as this. It doesn't get like the rainbow effect, which is kind of disappointing. I don't know how they would put that on a deck box, but actually on the binder it looked pretty good. But as far as the deck box goes, I mean, it's like better than nothing. This would have been cool to have on the mat, this sort of halfway point between like the nothing and like a full-on like rainbow effect. This is kind of like the halfway point. It would have been cool to put it on the mat. Now, as far as this deck box goes, okay, one big complaint that I've had already, this thing is tiny. I mean, it is tight. Even with just a 40-card main, a 15-card side, and a 15-card extra deck, you are looking at basically 0 space in there. You can kind of see, I mean, it is like up against the wall there. That is, and these are not like super thick sleeves like Dragon Shields. I wouldn't even imagine that Dragon Shields, a full main and side deck, could actually fit in there. You'll also notice that this is missing the extra deck because I took the extra deck out. We have this. So this is just, I mean, it's already, I mean, I think it could be squished a little bit, but you're already looking at, just for the main and side deck, not much space. When you put the extra deck in there, there's almost no extra room, and that is really disappointing because in the past, the Konami sort of deck box, you can kind of see there's like no room for here. So if you're playing like even 45 cards, it'd probably be like impossible to fit them in there. I guess I do have a few tokens, so you could potentially take those out. But overall, it is just not very spacious. And actually, what's interesting is that this thing's about half the size as like the most recent Konami deck boxes. I actually have one here. This is one that I was using for a while. This is the movie deck box, and you can also kind of see this probably isn't like this deck box's fault, but all these Konami deck boxes, they sort of rub off with the use. And I use this deck box for a lot of time. But anyway, you can kind of see here, like it's literally, well, it's kind of when you do that, but it's almost about half the size of the normal like Konami official deck box, and that is a pretty big issue. It means that you do not have a lot of room for stuff if you're playing more than 40 cards. It means you can't fit Dragon Shields in there. It means you have no room for really any extra except for your main extra side. Even just more than like 4 or 5 tokens would be pretty tight, and I think for me personally that's really disappointing because I like using these deck boxes. They're not the most practical deck boxes. I'm a big fan of like Ultra Pro. I'm a big fan of monster deck boxes. The monster double deck boxes are really good, but they look cool and they really do stand out. They're not like the anime deck boxes like you see a lot of people use. They're not like the double deck boxes, but they're pretty cool. But this one, I mean, this is tiny. This is the same size basically as like the single deck Ultra Pro deck boxes, and they're just not made in mind with extra decks. I mean, that's really how it goes, right? These sort of size deck boxes, when you're looking at Ultra Pro, they're sort of just like magic stuff. Like you have a 60 card deck and maybe something along those lines, not really like a main extra inside, like in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh, not really counting tokens either. And that's like a main problem. I think as far as the longevity of this goes, it'll be tough to like keep using this. I notice even like it's tough. You can't even, like, when you pull out like your extra main inside, you have to pull them all out at like one time because you don't even have enough room to like fit your finger in there without like ripping a sleeve and like trying to pull it out. So I mean, this isn't like my favorite part of this product lineup, but it's like pretty good. I also will say you can kind of notice this is like a really small nitpick, but it's worth mentioning. It is super like not even here. You can see like this side has probably about twice as much black space as this left side does, and that might not like make anyone like or make everyone mad, but I think for me personally, when I noticed that, especially on the top here, you can see the border on the top and the right hand side is so much thicker than the left side. That's not really like the highest quality item, and also I've had sort of plastic strips come off from these corners or these edges, just like in strips, like it'd come off at the bottom and you can just like pull it all the way up. Not really the greatest quality thing. I didn't have that issue with this one though. This seems to be like made of a different plastic, so I'm not entirely sure, but overall that's sort of my review of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Golden Duelist collection. I think the best product to buy after using this stuff for one weekend, and I'm going to use it again for this weekend, I think the best thing to buy is going to be the sleeves. I think Konami, when you use them for the extra deck, the sleeves that they make are pretty cool looking and they're pretty nice to the touch. It's just using them for the main deck isn't really an option. I think the deck box is like okay. I think the mat is probably like the worst product. As far as the binder goes, if you're in like the market for a binder, I suppose you could buy it. Personally, I just have way too many binders already, so I'm not really interested in that, but I would have got it for this video if someone would have had it, but none of the vendors actually had the binder, which was pretty disappointing. But anyway, hope that you guys enjoyed today's discussion video on this Yu-Gi-Oh! Golden Duelist collection product lineup. Have you used any of these yourself? Let me know in the comment section below what you think of them. Anyway though, I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.